Hello friends, how are you today? I have got an awesome set of stories for you for the full moon and some fascinating, interesting, behind the scenes influences on the energy, including looking at the asteroid Diesel, the asteroid Daedalus. There's a fascinating story there that relates to current prominent figures, looking at Anteros. So let's get into this, and then I have a free report for you that I'm offering for this full moon. It's much shorter than my new moon report, and I'm happy to share it here with you. I'm testing to gauge interest in these reports and in this information. So, and please share my video and the link to my free reports. And if you like it, give it a like and subscribe. Thank you so much for being here. I recorded this video and then realized I hadn't talked about the elections, and I had a potent thing for you on the American elections. Not about politics, just about the energies. I'm going to show you this. Here we have America. This is the asteroid America at 3 degrees of Libra. And you have Lucifer, the dark prince, here at 3 degrees of Capricorn. Now, what's interesting, I looked at the midpoints. He is sitting conjunct the midpoint of Pluto and Hygeia, so power and health and wellness. Behind the scenes, this dark influence is attempting to manipulate these areas. Now, what's working in our favor? He is distracted by Persephone. This is Persephone here at 3 degrees. She is now exact trine. She is in his realm, and she is the goddess of the underworld. So he is, thankfully for our sakes, distracted by her. And look what happens today at the full moon and major critical history-making elections in the United States of America. America squares Lucifer. America squares off against Lucifer and says, oh, hell no. And that is the result that I think that you will see happening. Whatever happens with voting as it unfolds. Okay, this full moon is both conjunct at the exact degree of Uranus and at an eclipse. The eclipse peaks just 3 minutes before the peak of the full moon. All this, of course, opposes the sun. Here's the variance between the new moon and the full moon. You could pause it and take a look if you'd like, but I'd like to just point out a couple important things. The moon moved to Taurus, and it's right there with Uranus at the same degree, 16. Mars has turned retrograde now with this full moon. Mercury and the Sun are both, and Venus are all conjunct again in Scorpio, opposing the moon. And Jupiter has moved into Pisces at 29 degrees, a very karmic degree, the full expression of Piscean energy from a karmic standpoint comes through here. So let's get into the stories. First, the strength of the planets. Let's take a look at the essential dignities here. And that is that the moon is extremely strong here with +8 power. Mars is very strong here with 7, Mercury 5, Jupiter 5, and Saturn 5. The weakest influences here are the Sun and Venus. So what does this mean? This means our emotions, the moon, are really what's going to set things off with these energies. With Uranus at the exact same degree at the moon and a potent square to Saturn here, it's extremely dynamic and intense. Not only is there a square here between Saturn and Uranus, but in the declinations they are opposing within orb. So a meaningful opposition. So you have those two planets in the astrology both square and at opposition. And this is extremely, extremely stressful. It's particularly stressful in the second house of value and money. The sun in Scorpio, we're talking about choices, decision, events that affect life and death. The sun is next to Venus in a stellium with the south node. So we are looking at how the past has influenced us. We want to talk about it, but in Scorpio, the sign of intense secrets, it's extremely difficult. It's difficult to communicate what we really want to say, and this creates this dramatic internal tension. The square is also with Saturn in the 11th house, which is the house of the group consciousness, the house of our future, right? Because all the planets have moved into Aquarius except for Pluto, which is going to move in a bit for a short bit in 2023 and then 2024 again. The 11th house is also the sign of salary. So stress over money is at obvious play here. There's almost, this is called a T-square, but it's interesting because the opposition with the sun and the square with Jupiter and Mars make almost like a scales type structure. There's a weighing here, and it's deeply personal and it's deeply felt with this scorpionic energy. There's a star here, Zubin, it'll be in my report. It's at the very top of the scales, and in ancient times it was at the claw of the scorpion, and it gives the idea here of a grab for power, a grab over the results of justice because of that scorpionic claw grabbing at the top of the scale. And fascinatingly, the asteroid Babylon is in this stellium here at 14 degrees. It's between the south node and Mercury. It's out of orb for the most part and influenced by declination. And at the very end of the stellium here, it's not at the major player, the sun. It's like Babylon's influence has to be from the side, right? It has to be related to its strength from the past or to its influence from the past upon things. Venus is at Zubin Shamali at 20 degrees here. It's conjunct that fixed star. Zubin Shamali is extremely favorable. So although we start out here at the south node, looking at our past and maybe even our dark past in the 8th house ruled by Scorpio, but we have an evolution here that ends with Venus at a very fortunate star. So we'll see what the outcomes of all of this is. Thankfully, that is semi-sextile, these asteroids here. I'm going to explain their influence in a second. The moon is at Menkar. I think that star is Menkar. And this is also considered to be a very difficult star. It's interesting. It's said to be the nose of the sea monster, but it actually looks, if you look at where it is in the constellation, it looks like it's at the mouth, okay? And it implies a voraciousness, a hunger, maybe even a hunger for that which is not one's own, which is grabbed through power and excessive powerful means. The sea monster was aiming at Andromeda. She was put up for sacrifice because of something that happened, and her father, the king, was given essentially no choice. The sea monster was going to terrorize his people, and the only way to listen to this. This is so interesting relative to the woo-woo history of Earth, okay, at this time in the 20th century, going back to the 1900s, okay, because an unfortunate event, a slip of the tongue, boasting happened. This caused Poseidon, the god of the sea, to be very angry with the kingdom. And so Andromeda's father was essentially given an untenable choice. His people would be terrorized unless he offered in sacrifice. Now, what head of state would want to face that? So he did that. He allowed Andromeda to be sacrificed Well, what happens with Andromeda is that she is saved by the hero Perseus, another strong male beneficial influence, and the sacrifice ends. Here's the asteroid Diesel, and it is conjunct Daedalus, or Daedalus, as my Greek friend Alex keeps telling me. Daedalus is the proper pronunciation. Look at this. Daedalus and Diesel are conjunct within a degree, these asteroids. Diesel is named for the inventor of the diesel engine. And it's fascinating because there's just all this media about the potential shortages of diesel fuel. And look at this. This crisis with Diesel and Daedalus, it's a spiritual crisis at heart. How do I know that? Because it is quincunx, the new moon, within a tight orb. It's quincunx within a tight orb, and especially of Uranus. Look at this. Uranus at 1657 is right up on Daedalus and Diesel. So this crisis here brings about a spiritual awakening, and it requires us to look within and heal ourselves, take our own action, be self-responsible spiritually for who we are and what's going on in our lives to resolve this crisis. There's the potential for a facile resolution. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but I saw that in the astrology. And you see here that Diesel is exact sextile at the same degree of Sagittarius. These issues are critical to us building the future. And that is why there's going to be a shift and a change. It's phenomenal. Okay, let me just put this here so you can see it all. Hygeia is quincunx, the moon, but it's very wide. Health issues present a spiritual challenge, and at a 4-degree or orb, it seems unsolvable right now. This is very, very potent. What is really at stake here? I got to show this to you because I had a real strong spiritual guidance to look at this information. Look at this. We've got a yod here to Haumea, the Hawaiian goddess of fertility, and she is at 29 in Libra. This is extremely karmic and the most potent and full expression of the energies of Libra, the energies of justice. And look what is at the exact degree of Haumea, Anteros. Anteros is like the opposite of Eros. It can be a very difficult energy. Anteros can be about difficult and hard to bear longing around love. And this is very long term. It's about the individual, but it can have a generational effect. It can be about love across the entirety of our life, or even coming from the past, or something we were born with, maybe even from a past life where there's this long love that we know, that we feel, but it's like we can't grasp it. Anteros is about lost love as well. It's about the passing of love. And many elderly are passing on right now in ways that have been that are difficult to bear for their family members, and elderly couples are passing on. But it's also about the ability to find real and lasting true love within one's lifetime in the sacred union of marriage. Is this possible? Well, the wings of the yod, look at this, are exact with Jupiter retrograde. This is a spiritual crisis of great magnitude, possibly the greatest magnitude that we will face in our lifetimes, because Jupiter at 29, Pisces, is the full expression of this degree. In retrograde, we're really looking at what we are deeply looking at this in our lives. And Jupiter, with that expanding and contracting energy, contracting retrograde, but it is going to break apart whatever spiritual delusions we have over issues around long love, the desire for real love, lost love, and fertility. Because fertility is a big issue right now. Couples want to have children. They want to continue their family line. And there are real and significant issues under the surface here These asteroids are telling us what is at stake, and we feel it and we know it, and it all revolves around the trauma of the children. Sedna is retrograde. She is the child that was thrown overboard by her father. What is the solution here to these problems of fertility, of lost love, of spiritual crisis? It is miraculous healing. And I know that you might not feel good hearing that. Why? Because when the energies are this intense, it can be hard to have faith. It can be hard to see God's influence. It can be hard to say God is really working here somehow to turn the darkness to light, to transmute my challenges to my highest good. And so we don't want to hear that. Okay, as the sirens go off in the background, this is a dramatic crisis. And whatever happens here, okay, this is what's behind the scenes. Wow. So what I'm trying to say is that whatever happens here in this hard square between Saturn, Taurus, how are we going to make money here? How are we going to use our resources to maintain wealth and value? Sorry about that. I don't have my notifications off. These issues hit us so critically that we feel them at the level of life and death. How am I going to survive? But what I'm saying is that this is what it's really about. And now you see here Ceres. Now Ceres is exact sextile to the sun. And let me show you over here. She's at 16, okay? And you see that the sun is semi-sextile to Diesel and Daedalus. So if you remember, Ceres was exact with Diesel at 10 degrees previously. And when I saw that, see, Ceres has been addressing the issues of Sedna as she's come through the bottom part of the chart here. It's a long story that started with the previous eclipses of the sun and the moon last year at this time. You can go and listen to my videos about that to hear much more about the story of Sedna. But she has been considering, how do we address the trauma of the children? And she's here in Virgo, so she wants to know the details. And somehow, friends, I'm telling you that diesel fuel and trucking somehow relates. I don't know how, but that is what the astrology is saying here. You see how she is trine Uranus. These energies feed each other. The shift that happens, the striking changes that happen, are going to rectify this situation because the Divine Mother's involved. And she's complaining to God. Uranus is the old God. Uranus is the old representation of God. Ooh. And the other representation of God here, Jupiter, we just discussed. I've got to tell you about this. Daedalus, within 1.5 degrees, quincunx the new moon, spiritual challenge. Okay, here's the story. Daedalus was an incredible inventor, an incredibly inventive man. He created the labyrinth that housed the Minotaur. He worked for King Minos. And so what happened was the Minotaur was offered sacrifices of children, 7 boys and 7 girls, periodically. And Daedalus created the maze within which the Minotaur lived, and the sacrifices were delivered. And I know it's sad. It's terrible. So here's what happened. Now, Daedalus was extremely self-centered, extremely selfish. He had a son, Icarus, Daedalus's son. Daedalus, who works for the king. Daedalus's son, Icarus, was impetuous. He was a poor decision maker, and he flew high. He flew too high, so much so that he was destroyed. The sun melted the wings of wax of Icarus, who was trying to escape after angering the king with Daedalus. Daedalus's son Icarus wouldn't listen to Daedalus, and he flew as high to the sun as he could, and the wings melted the wax, and Icarus fell to the earth. So here's what Daedalus did before having to escape. This is what caused the king behind the scenes to be so angry? Through his own selfish interest, he helped Ariadne and Theseus find their way through the labyrinth. He taught Ariadne the secrets. Ariadne taught Theseus, and Theseus went and killed Minotaur, thereby ending the sacrifices of the children to the Minotaur. These are fascinating themes that strike at the heart of humanity and the future that we are going to have. And how these stories are resolved affects us deeply. But what I'm saying here, because I sat in the park recently and I chatted with a man who was extremely concerned about the outcome of today's election. I'm making this on election day. And I said to him, I told him the story of Daedalus. And I said, look, whatever transpires, whoever you think is the good guy and you think is the bad guy, and he was concerned bad guys would get power, okay? Let's just sum that up like that. I said, look, you don't know what divinity is doing here. If we act in alignment with what in our hearts from the soul level we think is the highest good, and then give it to God to unfold, miraculous things can happen. But just because we think someone's a bad guy, because Daedalus is clearly the bad guy, okay? He's a suck-up to the king. He murdered his nephew to maintain his important position and rise up before he got to work for the king. Yet, he ends up ending the societal sacrifices in his society. He actually escapes. Icarus does not. It's very, very interesting. Will he escape this time? I don't know. I guess that depends on other factors here. The positive men behind the scenes and what they are doing and the weight of the scales, right? At the sun and the choices we've made all come into play here. Now, when Perseus saves Andromeda, this is a calling not for us to be saved by others, but for us to have the self-responsibility to reach deep down within and connect with our inner male, okay, that is strong, and connect with our inner female that is chained, and allow these two to work together to rise ourselves up out of the situations we currently find ourselves in. And why do I say that justice is individual and the responsibility that we take is individual? Because Varuna here is at 7 degrees. Varuna, the god of the sea, that the sea monster is in. Now, Varuna is not within orb of any of these stories, but it's in the background and important for the new moon lunar month, which ends on the 22nd. But this is about individual justice at the individual level, and for that we need to take personal responsibility. Fascinatingly, Varuna is going to come into important play in coming weeks. I'll tell you about that as we go along. There's this intense square between Mars and Jupiter, and this just aggravates the entire situation. Mars is at 25 degrees. Lilith and Athena have moved to 23, and they're keeping an eye on what their brother does. Their brother is in this interesting place because 25 degrees is about pruning a garden. And retrograding Mars is moving towards 25. That's the Sabian symbol. It's about pruning a garden, about palm trees growing, and there's an appreciation of growth and growing things in nature. Well, this is most likely aggravating the problems with growing humans, with growing babies that we're facing. Mars can be rageful, but in Gemini, one has to wonder what form Mars's action takes. Is it going to be about communication? Mars's quincunx here at Pluto, and there's a lot of information about this in my lunar month report, new moon lunar month report, all about the dynamics of this and the star that Pluto is at. Pluto is the most, likely to tip the balance here because it's at Terabellum and close to the Mars point. And when Mars conjuncts Terabellum, rash actions can happen. but there are moderating influences. What's going on at this full moon? We are done. Okay, we are so stressed by these energies. We are just done. And in being done, we are going to powerfully speak our truth, and we don't care what the consequences of that are. Because speaking our truth, God comes through us, divinity comes through us, and that becomes more important to us than anything else. And I think it's very verbal here. I think it's very verbal, besides whatever other earth-related changes happen in our structures, in our societies. And I think that's why the fight for speech is so intense right now. The energies say that is incredibly important. We care about what's at stake. It has become so personal. We are talking about our loved ones. We are talking about the ability to continue our families here. We feel this deeply. Anteros is tugging at our heartstrings. And we are coming into focus around what is really important in life, period. And what is the status of these energies.